Chapter 1. The Metal and the Whisper. The hall smelled faintly of polished brass and old varnish, the kind of scent you only get in buildings older than your grandparents, where history clings to every wall. My boots clicked against the gleaming parquet floor as I crossed to the podium, each step echoing in the expectant hush. They told me the ceremony was just routine commendation, a quiet pat on the back for my latest deployment. But the banners, the journalists in the back row, the dozen high-ranking officers seated along the side wall. This was anything but quiet. I stood at attention, my hands clasped tightly behind my back as a commander of fleet operations pinned the Navy Cross to my uniform. Flashes from the press cameras caught the faint sheen of sweat on my temple. The mission I'd returned from 3 weeks ago was still officially classified, but everyone in this room knew the rumors, the convoy that had made it through hostile waters without a single casualty. It should have been the proudest moment of my career. And for a few seconds, it was. From the corner of my eye, I saw my wife, Ilora, in a fitted navy blue dress that matched her eyes. She was standing near her father, General Victor Dalka, the man who'd been both my harshest critic and my reluctant mentor. He was head of Eastern Command, a man whose medals could fill a wall. I'd spent years trying to earn his respect, never quite getting more than a cape nod in return. But today, as I stepped down from the stage, he actually clapped. It was the briefest of gestures, but enough to make me think maybe, just maybe, I'd finally bridged the distance between us. Then I saw it. Ilara leaned in close to him, her lips almost brushing his ear, her eyes flicking toward me for the briefest moment before she whispered something I couldn't hear. It wasn't the whisper itself that froze me. It was the way his entire expression changed in an instant. 1 second, he looked like a man tolerating a formal event. The next, his jaw was rigid, his nostrils flaring ever so slightly. His hand stilled mid-clap. He didn't look at me again. I kept moving, shaking hands, smiling for the cameras, but my mind kept circling back to that moment like a shark in shallow water. What could she have possibly said? And why did it feel like the temperature in the hall had just dropped 10 degrees? As the reception went on, I noticed Ilara avoiding me. Not overtly. She stayed in the general area, laughing lightly with other officers' spouses, but every time I stepped toward her, she drifted just far enough away to be out of reach. It wasn't the kind of thing anyone else would notice, but after 8 years of marriage, I knew her tells. Half an hour later, while I was answering a young lieutenant's question about navigation systems, I caught her again out of the corner of my eye. She was standing with her father and 2 other officers. One of them glanced at me and muttered something. Ilara's lips curled in a tight smile. Her father's face was stone. When the ceremony ended, I expected her to walk out with me. Instead, she claimed she needed to freshen up and slipped into the side corridor that led to the administrative offices. General Dalka didn't leave either. He was deep in conversation with an aide, his hand cutting through the air in sharp, decisive gestures. By the time I'd signed the necessary paperwork for the commendation, Ilara was nowhere in sight. I waited outside the building, the cool evening breeze off the harbor doing little to untangle the knot in my gut. 15 minutes later, she appeared, not flustered, not rushed, but calm. Too calm. She kissed my cheek, told me she'd see me at home, and walked straight to her father's staff car. He was already inside. Neither of them looked back at me as the vehicle pulled away. That night, I lay awake in our apartment, staring at the ceiling. The medal sat in its velvet box on the dresser, gleaming faintly in the street light that filtered through the blinds. It should have been a symbol of everything I'd worked for: discipline, honor, loyalty. Instead, all I could see in my mind was Ilara's lips moving beside her father's ear, and the way his eyes had changed the second she spoke. It was a look I'd seen once before, years ago, when an officer under his command was caught selling arms to a hostile militia. A look that said, "I know something, and it's going to burn you." What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly imagine, was that the whisper I saw would be the first domino in a chain that would tear my marriage apart, shatter my career, and uncover a betrayal that went far beyond me. Because whatever Ilara told him that day, it wasn't just about us. It was about the country we both swore to serve. Chapter 2. Summoned to the office. The summons came as a single line on my secure handset at 0600. Report Eastern Command. G in Dalka. Immediately. No good morning. No context. Just an order punched out like a verdict. The drive across base felt shorter than usual, like the road had been trimmed overnight to rush me somewhere I didn't want to go. A Marine at the checkpoint checked my ID twice, then waved me through with a stiffness that wasn't there yesterday. People can sense weather before it breaks. Soldiers sense storms in the chain of command. Eastern Command occupies an old stone building that used to be a customs house. General Victor Dalka had claimed the top floor years ago and turned it into a museum of past wars, campaign maps under glass, a shelf of captured radios, a cracked lifebuoy from a torpedoed ship. On the wall behind his desk hung a photograph of him swearing an oath with his tiny daughter perched on his hip, staring straight at the camera with fierce, serious eyes. That daughter was now my wife. His aide, Major Kleist, met me at the elevator. "Captain Rourke," he said, voice neutral to the point of empty. "This way." We passed 2 MPs posted at the corridor's corners, unusual, and a third outside Dalka's door. My stomach tightened. MPs meant security. 3 meant theater. Kleist ushered me in and closed the door behind me with a soft click. The room was colder than the hallway, or maybe it was just me. General Dalka stood at the window, hands behind his back, the harbor framed in glass like a painting. He didn't turn when he spoke. "Captain," he said, "sit." I stayed standing. "So, I'd prefer to stand." He turned then. I'd seen him angry. I'd seen him disappointed. This wasn't either. This was a face someone puts on when the floor has already dropped and they are choosing who to land on. He walked to his desk, opened a leather folder, and slid a manila envelope across the blotter. "Explain these," he said. Inside were glossy prints, surveillance quality. A man in a gray field jacket, IR filter grain softening the edges, sat across a table from someone whose face was a blur of pixels. A hotel room, small and bland. Kettles, beige curtains, a mounted TV. Another photo, a handshake, a flash drive palmed between fingers. A third, the man in the jacket leaving the room alone, head down, collar up. I knew the jacket before I knew the man. The right breast carried a stitch patch with a tiny frayed corner where a thread had pulled during a boarding drill in rough seas. The patch looked like it was almost, but not quite, perfectly restitched. I swallowed. "That looks like my jacket," I said. "Where were these taken?" "Seaforth Hotel. 40 minutes from base." He tapped a timestamp in the corner. 2 nights ago, 23:41 through 0:16. "So, I was in the infirmary at 23:30, I said. "Migraine. There's a nurse who—" He cut me off with 2 fingers. "Security logs show your keycard leaving the officer's residence at 22:59. Cameras caught you at the hotel lobby at 23:18. Room paid in cash." "That's not possible. My keycard was used," he said. "And that jacket is yours. That's the frayed patch you've refused to replace because you said it's earned wear." I stayed at the photos. The man's build matched mine. The posture was close. But something crawled at the edges of my mind. The watch. I wear mine on my right wrist. The habit of a lefty who signs documents with his left hand and checks time with his right. The man in the photo extended a left wrist to the kettle, watch face catching light. The detail flickered and vanished. My brain wanted to cling to it, but the room was moving too fast. "Who's the other party?" I asked. "A cultural attaché from a country that's been probing our convoy routes with submarines for the last 6 months," he said quietly. "Your jacket. Your keycard. A flash drive changing hands. 2 nights before a convoy departure." My heart thudded once, hard. "So, this is a setup." "Everything is a setup until it isn't," he said. He picked up another sheet and tossed it down. A log of network access. "Someone used your credentials to pull the convoy manifest from a restricted segment of 2011. MAC address masked. VPN hops through 3 friendly nations. Clever enough to look like you. Sloppy enough to do it the same night as the hotel meet." I didn't touch the paper. "I was home at 2011. Your wife confirms you left for a walk to clear your head shortly after 8 p.m. The floor scraped a few inches under me. Ilaris said that. He looked at me for a long beat. She did. I thought about the whisper at the ceremony, about the way she avoided me after. The metal box on the dresser like a tooth the house had grown. I tried to speak and heard my voice from far away. So, I didn't take a walk. I was making tea. We argued about the stove being too hot. We searched your quarters this morning, he said, with a warrant. My mouth went dry. What did you find? He flipped the folder shut. Nothing conclusive. Not nothing. Not your clay. Nothing conclusive. The words were a bridge to a place I didn't want to see. I put both hands on the back of the chair and leaned in. General, with respect, I have given this uniform every hour of my adult life. I have bled to keep those convoys safe. If someone used my badge, if someone wore my jacket, I want you to unleash me to find them. Your desire to hunt is noted, he said. But this is not a hunt. This is a proceeding. He nodded to the door. It opened. The two MPs from the corridor entered and stood at parade rest, eyes fixed forward. They didn't touch their weapons. They didn't need to. The message was already all over the room. So, I said, throat tight, what is this? You will surrender your sidearm, he said, and the words had the resigned cadence of a man reading the weather. You will be confined to quarters under watch until formal review at 0900 tomorrow. Tribunal will convene in the Great Hall. I will present the evidence. The evidence, I said, hearing something like a laugh in my own voice, ragged and humorless. A jacket and a keycard lock. And testimony, he said. From whom? I asked, though I already knew. He didn't answer. He sat down, suddenly older, and folded his hands on the desk. Michael, he said, and the shift from captain to my first name was a knife I didn't expect. If there is something I should know. So, there is, I said, surprising myself with a steadiness. I didn't do this. The silence stretched, a taut wire. He nodded once to the MPs. I unholstered my sidearm, cleared it, set it gently on the blotter, muzzle downrange because that's muscle memory you can't turn off even when your life is veering into a ditch. One MP stepped forward to take it. His hand shook almost imperceptibly. He was young. Maybe he'd been at the ceremony yesterday. Maybe he clapped. As they moved to escort me out, the door opened again, and Alara slipped inside. Her hair was pulled back, her face pale but dry. She looked at me first, no flinch, no tears, then at her father. Is it done? She asked. The room tilted. What's done? I said. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. If there was a message there, I couldn't read it. Go home, General Dalkas said, voice flat. We'll speak later. She nodded, stepped aside as we passed, and didn't touch me. As the door closed behind us, I heard the slight thud of her back against the wood and imagined her closing her eyes, exhaling. Relief, maybe, or something else. The MPs walked me through corridors that now felt too narrow, past officers who suddenly found reasons to study their shoes. Shame is a powerful rumor. It outruns facts every time. Back at the apartment, they stationed themselves in the hallway. We'll be right here, sir, the younger one said. He was polite. He looked sorry. I shut the door and stood in the quiet. My jacket hung on the back of a chair in the bedroom. I lifted it down, ran my thumb along the frayed edge of the patch, and felt heat climb into my face when I saw it. A new stitch, too tight, a different thread. Someone had handled it recently. In the kitchen, the kettle still sat on the stove. I picked it up without thinking and set it down again, harder than I meant to, as a thought slammed into place. The watch in the photo. Left wrist, not right. Details like that don't acquit you in tribunals. They get lost in bigger tides, but details like that can save you if you live long enough to use them. At 0830, the phone on the wall buzzed. The older MP's voice was muffled. Sir, the general requests you bring the medal box with you to the hall. The medal? I repeated. His words, sir. I looked at the velvet box on the dresser. The Navy cross inside seemed to stare back, accusatory, ridiculous. I closed it, slid it into my pocket, and caught myself in the mirror. When I stepped into the hallway, Alara was there, halfway down, speaking to Major Kleist in a low voice. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me, then reached for my sleeve as I approached, fingers grazing the fabric like she was adjusting a crooked thread. "Michael," she said softly, "don't make this harder." "On who?" I asked. Her mouth pressed into a line, a small shake of her head. Then she was past me, walking toward the elevator, toward a future I couldn't read. "Sir," the older MP said gently, "it's time." We marched in silence, the click of our steps counting down to a ceremony that would not end with applause. Outside the great hall, the double doors stood open like a mouthful of light. I took a breath, tasting brass and varnish and the sour edge of coffee and fear. Inside, waiting, were the faces that had nodded at me yesterday. And at the far end, behind the long table, General Dalka sat with his hands folded and a leather folder at his elbow. There was an empty seat beside him, reserved with a nameplate I couldn't make out from the doorway. A shadow crossed the entry behind us, and a quiet murmur rippled through the room as someone else entered by a side passage, someone whose arrival tightened spines without a word. But that was for the next page. For now, the only sound was the hollow thud of my boots as I walked toward the man who might save me, or ruin me, based on a whisper I hadn't heard and a truth I had not yet been allowed to see. Chapter 3. Stripped in front of the unit. The Great Hall of Eastern Command was built for spectacle. Its vaulted ceiling trapped echoes like secrets, and its floor, polished stone worn smooth by generations of boots, seemed to amplify every footstep until it was no longer sound, but weight pressing into your spine. When the MPs marched me in, the room was already full. Rows of officers in full dress uniform lined either side, their eyes following me the way you follow an ambulance on a quiet road. Curious, concerned, and a little grateful it's not you inside. At the far end, on a raised dais beneath the great crest of Eastern Command, sat General Victor Dalka. Beside him, a narrow table held a small stack of papers, a leather folder, and something I couldn't quite make out until I was halfway down the aisle. My jacket. Folded neatly, its frayed patch turned up like a badge of guilt. I was guided to the center of the floor. The MP stepped back but didn't leave. The silence in the hall was suffocating. Even the rustle of uniforms seemed absent, as if the whole building was holding its breath. Dalka rose slowly, his height and posture swallowing the space between us. He didn't look at the papers. He didn't need to. His eyes locked on mine, and for a moment, I thought I saw not anger, but something worse, resolve. "Captain Michael Rourke," he said, voice carrying effortlessly to every corner, "you stand accused of compromising operational security by meeting with a known foreign agent and transferring classified convoy data." A murmur rippled through the hall. He let it linger for exactly 2 beats before continuing. "These actions," he said, "violate the oath you swore to this nation, to this command, and to your comrades. They endanger the lives of every sailor in our fleet, and they disgrace the uniform you wear." He took the jacket from the table, held it up for all to see, then let it drop to the floor between us. The sound it made was quiet, a soft thud of fabric on stone. But in that silence, it might as well have been the crack of a rifle. "Step forward," he ordered. I did. My heartbeat was steady now, not because I was calm, but because I was past fear. There's a point where you're too deep into the storm to flinch at the rain. Dalka reached out and gripped the epaulette on my right shoulder. His fingers were like steel clamps. With a sharp, practiced motion, he tore the rank insignia from my uniform. Thread snapped audibly. He moved to the left shoulder, repeating the gesture. The sound echoed, or maybe I imagined it echoing. "You have disgraced this family," he said, his voice lowering, not to hide the words but to make sure I felt them. The family wasn't just him and Alara. It was the whole damn command. The people in this room. The crest looming over us. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. There was no defense he would hear. Not today. The court of his opinion had closed before I'd even walked in. He turned away from me, holding the insignia in his palm like evidence, and nodded toward the MPs. They stepped forward. My sidearm was already gone. Now they took position on either side of me. I could feel the eyes on my back as Dalka began reading from the papers on the table, a litany of evidence I'd already heard in his office, the keycard logs, the jacket, the photos. But now, with the full weight of the hall behind him, the words sounded like stone being laid into a wall, sealing me in. I scanned the rows, searching for Alara. She was there, seated in the front row, in a crisp navy suit. Her legs were crossed, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even pretending to be conflicted. Her face was composed, her gaze steady on her father. Not once did she look at me. That was when I realized she was enjoying this. Dalka finished the recitation and closed the folder. This tribunal will recommend immediate suspension of all duties, pending formal court-martial. Captain Rourke will be confined to quarters under guard. The MPs stepped in closer. I heard the shuffle of boots behind me as someone approached from the side entrance. Footsteps slower, heavier, carrying authority in their rhythm. A voice spoke, calm but edged with steel. General Dalka. The air in the hall shifted. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. Everyone in uniform knew that voice. Admiral Jonathan Murrell walked into view, his dress whites immaculate, the glint of sunlight catching on the gold of his rank pins. He didn't acknowledge me. He didn't need to. His eyes were locked on Dalka. Before you proceed, Murrell said, I request the floor. Dalka's jaw tightened. This is an internal matter, Admiral. Murrell stepped onto the dais without asking permission, his height nearly matching Dalka's. No matter is internal when it involves the security of the fleet, he said evenly. And I have information that changes the nature of these proceedings. The murmur in the room grew louder. Dalka hesitated for a fraction of a second, then gestured to the MPs to hold position. Murrell reached into his coat and pulled out a slim black case. From it, he withdrew a small USB drive and held it up between two fingers. This, he said, contains security footage taken less than 12 hours ago. The individual in this footage is not Captain Rourke. Dalka's eyes narrowed. Then who? Murrell didn't answer. Instead, he nodded to the technician at the side of the hall. The lights dimmed slightly as a screen descended from the ceiling. The Admiral's voice was calm, but I caught the edge beneath it, the kind of edge you only hear from someone who knows exactly how deep the blade will go. General, he said, before you condemn him, ask your daughter who she was with last night. A ripple of gasps spread through the room. My eyes snapped to Alara. Her face changed. It wasn't shock. It wasn't outrage. It was the sudden draining of all color, like a candle snuffed in an instant. She glanced at her father, then at me, and in that tiny movement, I saw it. Fear. Real fear. The MPs beside me didn't move. The room didn't breathe, and I knew whatever was on that footage was about to burn more than just my career. It was about to burn the lie she'd built, and the man who'd believed it. Chapter 4. The footage. The screen dropped like a guillotine. Lights dimmed, shoulders squared, and 100 pairs of eyes turned from me to the rectangle of blue that flickered, jittered, and then sharpened into a grainy hotel corridor. Seaforth Hotel, Cam 3, 23 hours 12 minutes and 8 seconds. A housekeeping cart rolled past the lens, pushed by a woman who never looked up. Doors, carpet, beige anonymity. Then the elevator doors parted and Alara stepped out. I felt my ribs cinch inward. Navy sheath dress under a dark coat. Hair pinned in the quick, efficient twist I knew from early morning departures. She didn't hesitate. She walked down the hall with the confidence of someone who had already rehearsed the route in her head. She knocked once at room 418. The door opened a fraction and a man's hand appeared, ushering her inside. The door clicked shut. The feed cut to CAM 418. Interior, a small room, washed-out colors, a glass table beneath a wall-mounted TV. Alara sat, crossed her legs, and leaned forward. The man across from her, face unobscured now, wore a suit that tried to be invisible. I recognized him from briefings as a cultural attaché with too many questions about our shipping lanes. Alara set her purse on the table and slid out a thumb drive. The tiny device looked obscene in its insignificance. Admiral Murrell glanced at the technician. Audio. A second channel layered in, thin but serviceable, the product of a directional MIC drilled discreetly through cheap drywall. Alara, low, you'll get the convoy locations tomorrow. Attaché. Your husband won't notice. Ilara, a breathy laugh, he believes the kettle burns hotter than it does. He loves proof more than people. A pulse of murmurs rippled through the hall like wind through flags. Dalka didn't look away from the screen. He didn't blink. The video jumped ahead. Ilara pulled out my lanyard, my access badge, the blue laminate catching a flash of light, then tucked it back into her purse. The attaché handed her an envelope. She counted the bills with the same composure she used to set our table. No shame, no thrill. Just process. Attaché. The jacket. Ilara, in the car. He'll sleep through anything after sumatriptan. Attaché, smiling clever. Ilara, efficient. The timestamp bled forward, 9 minutes and 31 seconds. Ilara stood, kissed the attaché once like sealing a pact, and left. The feed cut back to the corridor. She emerged, adjusted her coat, and walked away camera right. 30 seconds later, a man stepped out of 418 wearing a gray field jacket with a frayed patch on the right breast. He kept his head down. He could have been me in bad lighting if not for one detail. When he reached to press the elevator button, his watch flashed on his left wrist. "Freeze," Merle said. The frame held. He nodded to me, to the MPs, to the front row where Ilara sat stiff as a ship's figurehead. "Captain Rourke is left-handed," Merle said evenly. "He wears his watch on his right. This," he tapped the screen, "is a decoy wearing Captain Rourke's jacket, leaving after Ilara. Room charge was cash. Lobby camera shows no face." Ilara found her voice. It came out flatter than usual, like she'd borrowed it. "This is manipulation," she said. "Angles. Coincidence." The Admiral didn't address her. He clicked a remote. A still photo appeared, a close-up of the door handle of 418, powder-dusted, annotated with arrows. "Latent prints pulled at 0300, he said. Another slide. A photo of a lipstick-stained glass with grid overlays. "Matches." A third slide. A tiny hairpin on an ugly nightstand, bagged and tagged. "Chain of custody documented by Naval Investigative Service. Case Officer Hamady. Your fingerprints on the flash drive you handed over last night. Ilara." Dalka's shoulders shifted by a millimeter. Almost nothing, except I'd spent years measuring that man's tells. Something in him broke alignment. "General," Merle said, turning from the screen to the dais, "before this becomes a formal record of disgrace for the wrong man, you should ask your daughter who she was with last night." The whole inhaled as one organism. Ilara didn't cry. She didn't fold. She looked at me, then at her father, then back to the screen where her own hands were frozen over money and metal. Her lips parted. "I was with a friend," she said. "We were." "Working for who?" Merle asked. No rise in volume. No theatricality. Just the long knife of a question. "Protecting us," she said, and I heard the pivot, the desperate reach for a higher story. "You don't know the whole." "Enough," Dalkas said. The word hit the room like a hammer. He stood, the full height and mass of a man who had outlived friends and campaigns and secrets. He didn't look at me. He looked at her. It was the look of a soldier at a battlefield he thought was secure and now realized was mined. "Ilara," he said quietly, "tell me this is a forgery." She exhaled, a thin line of breath that trembled at the edges. "Father, I." "Tell me," he said again, softer, and the softness was worse than the shout. "Tell me how my badge was used to print a warrant this morning to search the quarters of an innocent man. Tell me why you whispered in my ear yesterday before you let me strip a loyal officer in front of his unit. I hadn't known that last part, that the warrant had been printed with his badge." Ilara's eyes flickered. She didn't answer. The silence became a physical thing. Merle clicked the remote once more. The screen displayed a log sheet with timestamps and IPs. Network access from Captain Rourke's credentials at 2011, routed through a government VPN endpoint from a terminal in General Dalka's private antechamber, he said. Video shows Ilara entering that room at 1956 using a family override. She left at 2019. Dalka's head turned an inch toward me without quite arriving. The betrayal braided through the room in new colors now. Not just marital, but filial, institutional. A daughter had used her father's house key to break her husband's life and set a trap under a nation's feet. Ilara squared her shoulders, as if bracing into weather. You cannot understand the pressure, she said. You train men to follow orders. But someone has to make sure the orders aren't corrupted. Our allies aren't allies. Our enemies aren't enemies. They are people. Who paid you in cash? Merle said, and asked for convoy routes. If there's a world in which that is patriotism, enlighten us. She went quiet, and I watched the distance grow between her and every uniform in the room. Merle set the remote down. The attaché you met has been under surveillance for months. Willette last night happened to confirm who was feeding him. The decoy in the jacket was one of his runners. He wanted to be seen with Rourke to give us the picture he thought would stick. He finally turned to me. He underestimated the appetite I have for details. He faced Dalka again. General, I ask that these proceedings be halted. Captain Rourke is to be reinstated pending formal clearing. And your daughter, he added, the slightest pause before the last two words, should be detained. The air thinned. Ilara's hand slid along her thigh, seeking purchase that wasn't there. For the first time, her voice betrayed her. Dad, she whispered, and in that small word I heard all the ages she had been, child, cadet, woman, fold on themselves. Dalka didn't answer at once. He looked at the screen still frozen on the watch glinting left, then at the room that had come to watch a man fall and was now watching something far heavier. He swallowed. Major Kleist, he said, not looking away from his daughter, clear the hall. A collective intake of breath. This wasn't a show anymore. This was triage. Kleist barked the order. Benchies scraped. Brass and braid flooded toward the doors with hands that didn't know where to rest. The MPs didn't move. When the hall was half empty, Dalka lifted a hand. Admiral Merle, remain. Captain Rourke, remain. MPs, hold. He waited until the doors thudded shut and the echo died. Then he spoke, and his voice was no longer the voice of a general or father, but of a man given a choice between two losses. Ilara Dalka Rourke, he said, formal even in the familiarity, you are placed under provisional arrest on suspicion of espionage and conspiracy to commit sabotage against the fleet. Her lips moved. You can't, she breathed. He nodded once, almost to himself. I can, he said, and I must. The younger MP stepped forward, cuffs in his hand, his face gray with the kind of sorrow you carry back home and spill to no one. He hesitated, looking to Dalka. Dalka nodded again. The steel circled Ilara's wrist with a click that sounded too loud in that vast room. She didn't look at me as they turned her toward the side door. She kept her eyes on her father like a sailor on a failing compass, searching for north in a sky that wouldn't answer. As they reached the threshold, she twisted, a final flare of defiance clawing through the calm. You think you've saved him, she said to Merle. Chin lifted. You've just opened a door you can't close. Merle's mouth tightened. We'll walk through it, he said. The door shut. The quiet that followed was neither relief nor victory. It was the bay field after the fire, the moment when you smell what's left and decide what can grow. Dalka stayed standing for a long time, eyes fixed on nothing I could see. When he finally spoke, it was to the air. Bring me everything, he said to no one and everyone. Everything you have. Everything you suspect. Everything you were afraid to say out loud. He turned to me then, and the weight in his face aged him a decade. Captain Rourke, he said softly, you will have your rank restored before sunset. I nodded because I didn't trust my voice. My hands shook once, then steadied. The metal in my pocket felt like a stone dredge from a river. Familiar, heavy, colder than it should be. The Admiral slid the USB back into its case. This changes the day, he said to Dalka. It does not finish it. No, I thought. It didn't. The footage had burned away the most obvious lie. But a bigger question smoldered underneath. Why? What had Ilara believed she was doing? Who had taught her to call treason a cure? And how long had I been sleeping next to a mission she never spoke aloud? Those answers weren't on any screen. They were out there, past the hotel, past the hall, past the bright line between us and them that now looked like a fog line washed thin by night tides. And I knew, somewhere beyond this room, the people she'd helped were already moving to cover their tracks. The door at the side opened again. A runner leaned in, face flushed. Admiral, he said, Breathless, we've got movement at the embassy. They're shredding. Merle didn't look surprised. Then we're right on time, he said, and the day lurched forward again. Ask ChatGPT. Chapter 5, Classified Knowledge. The hall was empty now. The echo of boots and whispered disbelief had drained out with the crowd, leaving only me, Admiral Merle, General Dalka, the MPs, and the silence that comes after detonation. Dalka remained behind the dais, but he no longer carried himself like the immovable general I'd known for years. He looked unmoored, a father processing a truth too jagged to swallow, too big to spit out. The man had commanded armored divisions in 2 conflicts without blinking. Now, with the evidence of his own daughter's betrayal still cooling on the screen, he seemed smaller. Merle closed the black case around the USB with the same deliberate care you might use sheathing a blade. He set it on the table between us, his expression unreadable. Captain Rourke, Merle said, breaking the quiet, I didn't bring this here to clear you out of kindness. You were one of 3 officers under suspicion for leaks. 2 others are still being investigated. This case, your case, just happened to have a faster resolution. The words landed heavier than I expected. So, I said, with respect, you mean this wasn't about protecting me? He gave a small, dry smile. Protecting you was incidental. Protecting the fleet is the point. Dalka's head lifted at that. And what exactly do you think you're protecting it from? His voice was low, but there was steel in it again. Merle looked at him. Not what? Who? And you just cuffed one of them. The younger MP shifted his stance, eyes darting between them. I stayed silent. Something told me the less I interrupted here, the more I'd learn. Merle leaned on the table, fingers spread. General, your daughter wasn't freelancing. She's part of a network that's been bleeding us for years. Small leaks, shipment manifests, port schedules, weather intel, nothing to set off alarms individually. But put together, you can chart our fleet's entire operational rhythm. Dalka's eyes narrowed. You're saying this has been going on under my command without my knowledge? I'm saying it's been going on under all our commands, Merle replied. And the people behind it are good at using family ties to keep it hidden. Your daughter's marriage to Captain Rourke here gave her 2 direct access points, your office and his credentials. It was strange, hearing them talk about me like a vulnerability instead of an officer. I kept my arms folded, partly to look composed, partly so no one could see my hands tighten into fists. Dalka's jaw flexed. Why didn't you bring this to me sooner? Because until last night, Merle said, we didn't know how high her handler sat in the diplomatic chain. Now we do. The attaché she met isn't just fishing. He's been placing assets in military families for over a decade, and is close to being pulled out of this country entirely. I thought about Alara in that hotel room, her calm movements, the way she'd counted the money without hesitation. So, I said to Merle, you said she wasn't freelancing. Then what's the mission? What's the payoff? He turned to me. Destabilization. Not the kind that makes headlines. The kind that makes allies think twice before calling us. The kind that makes trade partners reroute cargo to safer waters. You make the fleet look porous enough, and suddenly our reach shrinks without a shot fired. Dalka rubbed a hand across his face. I'd never seen him do that before. The gesture of a man trying to wipe away something that had already sunk too deep. And she, my daughter, has been part of this. Merle's answer was careful. For at least 18 months that we can prove. Maybe longer. My stomach tightened. 18 months. That would put her starting before my last overseas deployment, when she'd been so insistent about holding things together at home. Dalka's gaze shifted to me, and for a second I thought he might apologize. But he didn't. Instead, he said, Captain, you're reinstated effective immediately. But you're also being assigned to Admiral Merle's task group. If you want answers about what your wife has been doing, you'll find them with him. It was the closest thing to a peace offering I was going to get. I nodded once. Understood, sir. Merle glanced at the MPs. Where is she now? In holding, one replied. Level 3 security. Good, Merle said. Keep her there until we can arrange a controlled interview. Dalka's voice dropped a note lower. She's my daughter. You will not parade her in front of the entire intelligence board. This isn't about humiliation, Merle said evenly. It's about containment. Right now, her handler thinks she was compromised but not flipped. We want to keep it that way until we know what he'll do next. The tension between them was a live wire. I could feel it humming through the air. For a moment, I half expected Dalka to order everyone out except himself and Merle. Instead, he sank back into his chair. Do it your way, he said finally. But if you're wrong. I'm not wrong, Merle interrupted. The silence that followed was broken by the faint buzz of the runner's handset outside the door. The younger MP poked his head in. So, message from comms. The embassy's destroying documents. They've already burned through 3 shredders. And their vehicles are fueling up. Merle didn't even blink. Then we move now. He turned to me. Captain, you're coming with me. You're the only one who can walk into this with a personal angle and a believable grievance. They'll expect you to be bitter, maybe reckless. We'll use that. A part of me bristled at being a pawn in another game. But another part, the part that had been stripped in front of my unit and accused by my own wife, wanted in. Dalka didn't look at me as I stepped toward the door. But as I passed him, he said, low enough only I could hear, Michael, find out who turned her. And make them regret it. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Merle was already moving, his pace clipped, his coat swinging like a signal flag. We have 2 hours before the embassy locks down, he said over his shoulder. And if we're lucky, they won't expect you to be the one knocking. I followed, the weight of the metal in my pocket replaced now by something sharper, heavier, the knowledge that Alara hadn't just cheated on me. She'd cheated the country I'd bled for. And I intended to find out exactly why, and who she thought was worth betraying us all for. Chapter 6. The Voice on the Tape. The ride to Naval Intelligence Headquarters was silent except for the low growl of the armored SUV's engine and the occasional hiss of Merle's comms unit. He rode in the seat ahead of me, one arm resting across the back, his gaze fixed on the blur of the harbor outside. The city passed in patches, naval warehouses, cranes frozen mid-swing, gray water glittering under the morning sun. But my mind wasn't on the view. It was on the fact that, somewhere in a concrete cell, Alara was sitting alone. No handler, no attaché, no father to shield her, and no way for me to ask her the one question that had been burning through me since the Great Hall. Why? We turned down a restricted lane. The gates to NIHQ slid open with hydraulic precision. Beyond them, the building sat low and square, like a bunker pretending to be an office block. We passed 2 checkpoints before stopping at a side entrance. A pair of plainclothes agents waited, both with the kind of stillness you only see in people trained to act in 1 second or less. Inside, the air was cool, smelling faintly of ozone and paper. Merle didn't break stride. Operations wing, he told an aide who appeared as if conjured. Secure room 2. The aide nodded and peeled off, muttering into a MIC clipped under his collar. We descended 2 levels into the building's underbelly. The corridors narrowed, lights buzzing overhead in an even rhythm. Merle pushed through a steel door, and we stepped into a small briefing room, bare except for a table, 3 chairs, and a screen bolted to the wall. Sit, he told me. I did. He remained standing, pulling a manila envelope from inside his coat. Without ceremony, he slid a single photograph across the table. It was the attaché, the same man from the hotel footage, but younger. No suit, no diplomacy smile. He was in desert fatigues, standing beside a convoy truck somewhere that looked dry, hot, and unfriendly. And standing next to him, one hand on the truck's doorframe, was Alara. I felt my breath catch. She was younger here too, hair in a ponytail, no makeup, sunburn blooming across her nose. Her smile wasn't forced. Merle's voice was even. This was taken 8 years ago, not long before she met you. I looked up at him. She served. In a capacity, he said. Civilian aid program. Your wife's father was already commanding Eastern Command then. She got sent on a 6-month humanitarian rotation to a conflict-adjacent zone. Guess who else was stationed there on cultural liaison duty? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Merle tapped the photo. We think he recruited her then. Slowly, patiently. It's not unusual. Attach sentiment to ideology, and ideology to action. Make them believe they're doing the noble thing. I stared at Alara's face. She looked happy, open, the kind of happy I'd only seen in glimpses, before the shadow crept in. Why show me this now? I asked. Because, Muriel said, you're going to hear her voice in a minute, and I want you to know the difference between what's truth and what's the story she's been telling herself for years. He pulled a small recorder from his pocket and pressed play. At first, just static. Then her voice, low, controlled. Ilara, the next convoy leaves at 0700 Wednesday. Route altered to avoid radar coverage near Shewater Point. Man, and your husband, Ilara, thinks is protecting the country. Man, isn't he? Ilara, is protecting a country. Not the right one. I gripped the edge of the table. Not the right one. The recording continued. Man, you still believe we can pull this off? Ilara, we have to. My father's blind. My husband's loyal to a fault. No one else can see what's coming. Merle stopped the tape. That, he said, was 3 weeks ago. Same attaché. Different hotel. Different flash drive. My mouth fell dry. She believes she's saving something. He nodded once. That's the dangerous kind. The ones who think they're on the side of angels will walk through any fire you put in front of them. And they'll drag you through it too. I leaned back, forcing air into my lungs. What do you need from me? Muriel's gaze sharpened. The embassy's already destroying documents. We're moving in before they can burn it all. But they won't open the doors for me. They might for you. Because I'm the angry husband. Because they'll think you're looking for her, Muriel corrected. They'll believe you want answers, maybe even revenge. That buys us a window. While they're distracted, my team gets inside. I thought of Alara's whisper to her father at the ceremony. The smirk. The way she'd avoided my eyes in the hall. She'd been sure she'd won. Fine, I said. I'll play the part. Muriel studied me for a long moment. Just remember, Captain, once you walk in there, you're not representing the Navy. You're representing the man they think has been betrayed. That means you sell it. I stewed, adjusting my jacket. Don't worry, I said. I don't have to fake that part. We left the room, and as the steel door shut behind us, the aide from earlier appeared again. Vehicles ready, sir, he told Muriel. Muriel glanced at me. This is where it gets fast. I followed him up to the surface, the harsh daylight making me squint. The convoy of black vehicles waited, engines idling. Somewhere across the city, the embassy shredders were still chewing through paper, the last traces of whatever Alara had passed them. And in the pit of my stomach, I knew, if we didn't get inside now, the only voice I'd ever hear from her again would be the one on that tape. Calm, certain, convinced she'd been right to destroy me. Muriel climbed into the lead vehicle. I took the seat beside him. Embassy gates, he said into his comms. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to step into a nest of people who thought they'd already won. 5 minutes to find out if my wife had been lying to me from the very first day we met. Chapter 7. The Threat of Collapse. The convoy rolled through the city like a dark artery, each vehicle a clot of steel and tinted glass. The streets thinned as we neared the diplomatic quarter, tall stone walls, discreet security cameras, flagpoles whispering in the breeze. The air here always felt cleaner, quieter, but I'd long suspected it was just the illusion of control. Muriel sat forward in his seat, watching the gates of the embassy grow larger. You've got one job, Captain, he said. Get them to open the doors and hold their attention for as long as you can. Don't push too hard or they'll shut you down before we breach. I glanced at him, and while I'm in there, my team will find their way inside from the service entrance. Once they have what they came for, you'll hear 3 knocks on the nearest interior wall. That's your signal to get Clay. I nodded, trying to ignore the creeping itch between my shoulder blades. And if they decide not to let me leave? Muriel gave me the faintest smile. Then you'll know how convincing you were. We pulled up 50 feet from the gates. The embassy loomed behind them, an angular fortress dressed up as a diplomatic building, cream-colored stone, arched windows, and guards in pressed uniforms that hid the fact their rifles had live rounds chambered. The front gate was a double layer of steel and security glass. As soon as I stepped out of the SUV, the guards stiffened. They knew who I was. They also knew I wasn't here on official orders. I was dressed in my plain naval blues. No medals, no rank insignia. Just a man stripped of everything but the uniform's shape. I approached the outer checkpoint, letting the anger in my gut guide my stride. "I'm here to see the attaché," I said. My voice carried enough force to make the younger of the two guards glance at the other before answering. "Do you have an appointment, so?" "I don't make appointments with people who sleep with my wife," I snapped. That got their attention. The younger guard's jaw twitched. The older one stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sir, this is not." "Tell him Captain Michael Rourke is here," I interrupted, leaning on the metal desk between us. "Tell him I know what hotel room he used. Tell him I want my jacket back." The guard hesitated, weighing the trouble of sending me away against the trouble of letting me in. Finally, he picked up the phone and spoke in rapid, clipped sentences in his native language. From my peripheral vision, I caught a black van idling half a block down, Merle's infiltration team. The side door was cracked just enough for me to see the glint of suppressed weapons and the pale glow of a tablet screen. The guard hung up the phone. "He'll see you," he said, his tone flat. "Wait inside." The gate buzzed, the glass panel sliding aside just far enough for me to pass through to the inner compound. I walked under the shadow of the embassy's facade, the air cooler here, heavier. Inside, the lobby was designed to look open and welcoming, polished floors, high ceilings, art that pretended to be politically neutral. But every step I took reminded me that this was an outpost of another nation, one where I had no authority, no protection, and no promise of leaving under my own power. The attaché appeared at the far end of the hall, walking toward me with that same too-smooth smile I'd seen in the hotel footage. He extended a hand as though we were old friends. "Captain Rourke," he said, voice dripping with diplomatic civility. "This is unexpected." I didn't take his hand. "I'm not here for pleasantries." His smile widened a fraction. "Then what brings you to my door?" "You know what?" I said. "You've been using my name, my credentials, my jacket. You've been meeting with my wife in cheap hotel rooms. I want to hear it from you. Why?" He tilted his head, studying me like a specimen. "She came to me, Captain, not the other way around. She told me you were unhappy in your service, that you wanted a way out." I laughed once, short and sharp. "You either a bad liar or you think I'm a fool." The attaché's eyes flicked toward the hallway behind him, a subtle move, but enough to tell me someone else was listening. "Perhaps we should talk somewhere more private," he said. I followed him into a side office. The door clicked shut, muffling the faint hum of the lobby. He gestured to a chair, but I stayed standing. "You want me to believe she came to you for what? Money? Information?" I asked. "Belief is irrelevant," he said. "Your wife understands the world better than you do. She sees the lines of power shifting. She knows who will be holding them in the years to come." The arrogance in his tone made my teeth grind. She betrayed her country. He leaned back slightly, unbothered. "From where I sit, she protected it, just not the one you save." My fists itched to close, but I forced them open. I needed him talking, not shutting down. "So what happens now? You keep paying her while she rots in a cell." He gave a small, knowing smile. "She won't be there long. Men like you will see to that." Before I could respond, I heard it. 3 quick knocks on the wall to my right. Light, precise, just as Merle had described. I stepped back from the desk. "I think we're done, hey?" The attaché's eyes narrowed. "Are we?" "Yeah," I said. "But you might want to check the shredders in your records room. They've been working overtime." The color drained from his face, just enough to confirm what I already suspected. I turned and walked out without waiting for dismissal. The guards at the lobby stiffened as I passed, their radios crackling with rapid chatter. Outside, Merle's convoy was already in motion. I slipped into the lead SUV as it rolled forward, my pulse still hammering from the encounter. Merle didn't look at me right away. "We got it," he said finally. "Names. Accounts. Enough to burn their network here to the ground." I leaned back in the seat, exhaling slowly. But the tension didn't ease. Then why? I asked. Does it feel like we just kicked something bigger awake? Merle's eyes flicked to me in the rearview mirror. Because we did. The SUV accelerated, the embassy shrinking behind us. Somewhere inside, the attaché was already calculating his next move. And somewhere in a level 3 cell, Alara was probably doing the same. Neither of them was done. And neither was I. Chapter 8. The General's Dilemma. We didn't drive back to Eastern Command. Merle's convoy took a sharp turn away from the coastal highway and wound into the restricted perimeter of the Naval Detention Annex. The place wasn't marked on any public map. From the outside, it looked like a derelict supply depot, sun-bleached walls, chain-link fences patched with rust. But inside those walls was where the Navy kept people it didn't want anyone to know it was keeping. The SUV stopped in front of a narrow side entrance. 2 security officers stepped forward, scanning Merle's ID before opening the steel door. The air inside was cool, recycled, with that faint metallic taste you get in buildings that run on their own generators. She's in B3, one officer said, handing Merle a clipboard. Merle signed without looking at it, then turned to me. This is your choice, Captain. You can walk away right now. Let interrogators handle her. Or you can go in first. If you do, keep in mind, she knows you better than anyone in this building. She'll push every button she can. I stayed at the corridor ahead. Somewhere in that warren of reinforced rooms was the woman I'd built a life with. The woman who'd smiled at our wedding like I was her whole world, and whispered to her father the lie that almost destroyed me. I'll go in, I said. Merle studied my face for a beat, then nodded to the guard at the end of the hall. 2 minutes before we join you, he told him. The guard unlocked the heavy door to B3. I stepped inside. The room was stark, white walls, a steel table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs. Alara sat in one, hands cuffed in front of her, posture perfect. Her hair was pulled back in a way that reminded me of the photo Merle had shown me, the one from years ago, before all of this. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a second, I saw no recognition. Then the faintest smile curled her lips. Michael. Alara, I said, keeping my voice flat. You look tired, she said softly, as if we were in our kitchen after a long day. And you look, I paused, exactly like someone who got caught. Her smile didn't falter. I expected you'd come. You've always needed to see for yourself before you believe anything. I stepped closer, the table between us. Believe? I've seen the footage. I've heard your voice on tape. You handed over convoy routes to a foreign agent. You set me up to take the fall. I protected you, she said. The calm in her tone made my skin crawl. You stripped my rank in front of my unit. You told your father I was a traitor. She leaned forward slightly. If I hadn't, they'd have looked harder, and they'd have found the attaché's runner before Merle's people did. You'd be in a cell right now, not me. That's what you're calling protection? I asked, framing me to hide your own leak. Her gaze was steady, almost pitying. I didn't leak. I redirected. Those convoys weren't carrying what the manifest said. The routes I gave them, they led their subs into empty water. You think Merle knows everything? He doesn't see the whole board. I wanted to dismiss it, call it another lie. But the way she said it, with that mix of conviction and fatigue, made something in me hesitate. And what was in it for you? Nothing for me, she said. For us. For what comes after the next conflict. There are people in our own chain of command who'd sell us out for access to foreign markets. I gave information to keep their plans from working. By working with an enemy diplomat. I said, they are only the enemy because your uniform says so, she shot back. I've seen what they're trying to stop. You haven't. Her voice had sharpened, the calm cracking just enough for me to glimpse the steel underneath. You've been living with me for 8 years, I said quietly. Was any of it real? That stopped her. For the first time, she looked away. Yes, she said finally, but you were never going to stay mine once you saw the truth. A knock at the door. 2 slow, 1 quick. Merle's signal. I straightened. Your truth doesn't matter now. What matters is the damage you've done. She smiled again, but it was smaller now, edged with something like sadness. Then you'd better hope the people I was holding back don't decide you've made them angry. The door opened. Merle stepped in with General Dalka behind him. The general's uniform was immaculate, but his eyes looked like they hadn't closed since the tribunal. "Ilara," Dalka said, his voice low. "Father," she replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. Dalka stood there for a long moment, then looked at me. "Captain Rourke, leave us." I glanced at Merle, who gave the faintest nod. As I stepped out into the hall, I heard Dalka's voice behind me. "Stripped of command, stripped of armor." "Why?" I didn't hear her answer. The door shut, the lock clicked, and whatever passed between them in that room would stay there. Merle fell into step beside me as we walked back toward the exit. "She's not finished," he said quietly. "Men like the attaché don't invest years into someone without a contingency plan. That plan's already in motion. And you think she knows it?" "I think," he said, "she might be the plan." The words followed me out into the daylight, heavier than the air, heavier than the metal still sitting in my pocket, like a reminder of a victory that didn't feel like one. Because if Merle was right, the worst part wasn't what Ilara had done. It was what she might still be ready to do. Chapter 9. My Silent Fury. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't, because I didn't dare. Back in my quarters at Eastern Command, the silence felt wrong. The MPs were gone. The lock on my door had been replaced with a new digital panel one Merle's people had installed. But no amount of reinforced hardware could stop the feeling that I wasn't alone. The first sign came at 1:17. A faint tick-tick-tick on the window. Too light for rain, too irregular for the wind. I slid out of bed and kept to the shadows, edging toward the curtains. Another tick, metallic this time. When I pulled the curtain back a fraction, the street beyond looked empty. But the reflection in the glass showed something else. The faint red wink of a laser scope just above the angle of the neighboring building. That it wasn't aimed at me. It was aimed at the lock on my door. I moved fast, grabbing my sidearm from the bedside table and crouching by the wall. The lock screen blinked, static lines running across it. Someone was trying to breach it remotely. Merle's warning replayed in my head. She might be the plan. I crossed to the comms unit and punched in his secure frequency. It rang once before his voice came through, rough but alert. "Rourke, someone's outside," I said. "They're working the lock." "Stay inside," he ordered. "I'm sending a team." The lock gave a soft, traitorous chime. I cut him off. No time. The door swung inward a few inches before I kicked it shut from the side. A voice from the other side, calm, male, accented, said, "Captain, we just want to talk." "Then you picked the wrong hour," I called back. The man chuckled. "You've been looking for answers about your wife. We have them, and we can make you understand why she did what she did." That was bait, and they knew I knew it. "Understand enough," I said. The chuckle faded. "Then you understand you can't stop what's already in motion." Footsteps retreated down the hall. I waited 10 seconds, then flung the door open, weapon up. Empty. The corridor was silent except for the distant hum of the ventilation system. But a folded piece of paper lay on the floor just outside. I scooped it up and shut the door again before opening it. Inside was a single line of typed text. "She didn't betray you. She saved you." No signature. No markings. Just those words. Merle's team arrived 4 minutes later. 2 agents in tack gear, scanning the hall with compact SMGs. One took the note from me, slipping it into an evidence bag. The other examined the lock, muttering, "Manual override. No breach alarm because they bypassed the primary circuit." Merle himself walked in a moment later, his face carved from stone. "They're getting bold," he said. "Bold enough to walk up to my door," I said. "And bold enough to try to rewrite what I saw with my own eyes." Merle nodded to the evidence bag. "That's not for you to worry about right now." But it was all I could think about. At 4 o'clock, I was still awake, staring at the ceiling when my comms unit pinged with an encrypted message. It wasn't from Merle. It wasn't from anyone in our system. The sender ID was just a string of random characters. The message read, "If you want the truth, come alone. Doc 12, 0500. Everything about it screamed trap. But in my gut, I knew it was connected to the note. And maybe, just maybe, to the part of Alara's story I hadn't heard yet. I didn't tell Merle, not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted one unfiltered moment where the answers weren't wrapped in strategy and clearance levels. Dock 12 was a cargo pier at the edge of the base, half its warehouses condemned, the other half used for storage. The pre-dawn air was cold enough to bite. Fog rolled off the water, turning the sodium lights into pale halos. A figure stood at the end of the pier, hands in pockets. Tall, lean, civilian clothes. As I approached, he turned. It was the attaché's runner, the man in the jacket from the hotel footage. "You made good time," he said, his breath fogging in the air. "You've got 2 minutes before I put you in cuffs," I said. He smiled faintly. "If I thought that would happen, I wouldn't be here. You're here because you still don't know why she did it. And you're smart enough to know there's a difference between a traitor and a saboteur." "Explain," I said. He nodded toward the water. "She gave us those convoy routes." "Yes. But the ships we tracked from them, they weren't carrying munitions or troops. They were carrying components for a weapons system your own government wasn't supposed to have. Something that would break every treaty your allies signed. She was making sure it never reached the assembly line." I kept my weapon down, but my grip tightened. "You expect me to believe she was stopping an illegal weapons program?" "I expect you to look for the manifests yourself," he said. "If you can find them, you'll see they don't match what's on official record. Ask yourself why." His eyes flicked past me. "And now we're out of time." A low hum reached my ears, a drone, somewhere above the fog. The runner backed away, raising his hands. "They're coming. And if they find me here, we both lose." He stepped off the pier into the shadows between 2 cargo boats. By the time I reached the edge, he was gone. Headlights cut through the mist from the pier entrance. Merle's SUV. I straightened, forcing my breathing to slow. I didn't know yet whether the runner had told me the truth, a half-truth, or just another layer of the lie. But one thing was certain. Ilara's betrayal wasn't as simple as it had looked. And if she really had been playing a longer game, then we were all still pieces on a board I hadn't even seen yet. Chapter 10, Arrest Warrant. By the time the sun rose over Eastern Command, the air was already thick with the kind of anticipation you can taste. Word had spread, faster than any official memo could have carried it, that I was being reinstated. The official orders came through at 0700 sharp. A sealed envelope, hand-delivered by Major Kleist, bearing the gold seal of the Fleet Office. Inside, the language was terse, bureaucratic. "Captain Michael Rourke is hereby reinstated to full rank and privileges, effective immediately, with all honors restored." But the final line caught me. "By direct order of Admiral Jonathan Merle, approved by General Victor Dalka." Dalka's name, on paper, restoring me. The irony wasn't lost on me. The ceremony was scheduled for 0900 in the same Great Hall, where I'd been stripped just 2 days earlier. I'd walked into that room in uniform before, but this time, as I buttoned the crisp jacket and pinned my rank back on, I felt every stitch. It wasn't pride. It was a warning to myself. Uniforms are symbols, and symbols can be torn apart in seconds. Merle met me outside the hall. His expression was unreadable, but I caught the flicker of something. Approval, maybe. Or calculation. "You'll stand to Dalka's right," he said. "No speeches. We want this clean." Inside, the room was packed. Officers lined the walls, some standing ramrod straight, others leaning subtly forward to catch every detail. The same faces that had watched me fall were here to watch me rise, and I could feel the weight of their collective memory pressing in. Dalka stood at the dais. He looked older than he had 2 days ago, but his posture was flawless. When he began to speak, his voice carried the authority that decades in command will give you, even if your personal world is on fire. 2 days ago, he began, this hall bore witness to the removal of rank from Captain Michael Rourke, based on evidence and testimony presented to this command. His pause was deliberate. That evidence was proven false. That testimony was given in bad faith. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dalka let it run its course before continuing. In light of the truth brought forward by Admiral Merle, and with the approval of this command, Captain Rourke's name is cleared. His service record is restored, and his commission is reaffirmed. He turned to me then, holding out the insignia he'd torn from my shoulder. For a fraction of a second, our eyes met. I couldn't read him, not fully, but I saw something there that wasn't in the hall 2 days ago. Regret? Maybe. Or just the grim recognition of what his own blood had done. I stepped forward. He pinned the insignia back onto my uniform with the same precision he'd used to remove it. "Welcome back, Captain," he said quietly, "just for me." The crowd broke into polite applause, the kind that's as much about the moment as the man. I gave a single nod to the room, then stepped back. Merle took the podium next. "The investigation into the security breach is ongoing," he said. "What we can confirm is that hostile actors attempted to compromise this command using falsified evidence and personal connections. Those responsible will face the full measure of military justice." His gaze swept the room, pausing just long enough on certain faces to make his meaning clear. "And let me be perfectly clear, this is not over. The network behind this breach is still active. They have lost an asset, but they have not lost their reach." I felt the shift in the air, the realization that this wasn't just about one officer's reinstatement. It was about a shadow war threading through our ranks. After the ceremony, as the crowd began to break apart, Merle caught my arm and steered me toward a side exit. The hallway was quiet, the only sound the echo of our footsteps. "You did well," he said. "But don't mistake today for a victory lap. The attaché's runner didn't vanish after Dock 12. We've got chatter that has already been in contact with someone on base." I slowed. "Someone in uniform?" Merle nodded once. "And here's the part you're not going to like. Our analysts think it might be someone in your old convoy unit." That hit harder than I wanted to admit. "You think they were working with Alara?" "I think," Merle said, "that she wasn't working alone. And if that's true, reinstating you just made you more valuable to them and more dangerous." We stopped outside his office. He looked at me for a long moment. "Dalka signed your reinstatement because it was the right thing to do. But make no mistake, if he finds out you're moving against someone he trusts, he might not stand with you next time." Before I could respond, Major Kleist appeared down the hall, walking fast. He carried a red folder, the kind reserved for immediate action orders. "Admiral," Kleist said, slightly out of breath, "the warrant's ready." Merle took the folder and opened it just enough for me to see the name on the first page. Ilara Dalkarok, Level 7 Security Offense. My chest tightened. "You're moving her?" Merle nodded. "We're transferring her to a secure black site before her handler can make a play. The paperwork's signed. Dalka knows. He didn't fight it. That surprised me. Is just letting her go." Merle's jaw worked once before he answered. "Is a general, Michael, but is also a father. Letting her go isn't the same as letting her go forever. That's his dilemma, and it's one we need to resolve before someone else does." He closed the folder and handed it back to Kleist. "Prep the transport," he ordered. As they walked away, I stood there, the echoes of the hall's applause still in my ears. I had my rank, my uniform, my name. But now I also had a choice: stand back and let Merle run this, or get ahead of it before Alara's network made their next move. Because if the runner at Dock 12 was telling the truth, Alara's arrest might not have been the end of her mission. It might have been the start. Chapter 11, Fallout. The transport convoy rolled out just before midnight. 2 unmarked SUVs in front, a matte black van in the middle, and another pair of SUVs at the rear. No insignia, no markings, just shadows on wheels. I wasn't supposed to be there. Merle had made it clear this was a need-to-know transfer, and technically, my reinstatement didn't grant me need-to-know clearance for Level 7 detainee movements. But the moment I saw Alara's name on that warrant, I knew I wouldn't be able to sit in my quarters and wait for a status update. So I'd volunteered for additional security, and Merle hadn't said no. He just gave me a look that said, "If you're coming, you're playing by my rules." I rode in the SUV directly behind the van, 2 naval intelligence agents on either side of me. Their expressions were professional but tense. Everyone in that convoy knew this wasn't just a routine prisoner transfer. The embassy had gone quiet, too quiet, after the dock incident, and no one believed that meant they'd given up. The route had been chosen for unpredictability. doubling back through side streets, looping around industrial blocks, cutting across a disused freight yard. At each checkpoint, the lead sub's driver would flash a coded signal to an unmarked security detail before we were waved through. Half an hour in, we passed the last safe checkpoint and entered the Black Zone, an industrial district where street cameras had been deliberately disabled for the convoy. Less surveillance meant fewer eyes if something went wrong. It also meant fewer witnesses if we were hit. Murrell's voice crackled over comms. "Keep formation. Watch your flanks. We're halfway." That was when the lead sub's headlights caught something, a stack of cargo pallets in the middle of the road. The driver swerved around them, but as soon as the second SUV moved to follow, the pallets exploded outward in a burst of splinters and smoke. A black pickup roared out from the alley, cutting between the convoy and slamming broadside into the second SUV. The sound was brutal, metal folding on metal, tires screaming. "Contact! Contact!" someone shouted over comms. I barely had time to register before the van ahead of me slammed its brakes. Two men in dark tactical gear jumped out from a warehouse doorway, heading straight for the side door where Alara was being held. "Go, go!" The agent beside me barked, and we spilled out of the SUV. My boots hit the asphalt, and I was moving before I'd even drawn my weapon. One of the attackers yanked the van's door open. The interior lights flared, and there she was, hands still cuffed, eyes wide. For a split second, her gaze locked on mine. The attacker reached for her. I didn't think. I just closed the distance and drove my shoulder into him, slamming him into the van's frame. He grunted, tried to bring a knife up, but I caught his wrist and wrenched it until the blade clattered to the ground. The second man raised a suppressed pistol toward me, but before he could fire, one of our rear SUV agents took him down with two clean shots to the chest. Gunfire cracked somewhere to the left, our lead SUVs returning fire on figures moving between the warehouses. The comms were alive with overlapping calls. "Two down. We've got movement on the roof. Re-guard. Hold position." Alara's voice cut through it all, sharp and urgent. "Michael, they're not here to kill me. They're here to take me out of your custody." I grabbed her arm, hauling her toward the van's far side. "You think I don't know that? They'll keep trying until they succeed," she said, breathless. "If you let them take me, you'll never find out who's running this." I didn't have time to answer. A third attacker dropped from a fire escape above us, landing hard enough to jar the pavement. His rifle came up, but I pushed Alara down behind the van and fired twice. The shots tore into his chest, spinning him back into the shadows. Murrell's voice boomed over the comms. "Convoy, move. Move now." The drivers didn't wait for a second order. Engines roared. Tires squealed. Agents dragged the injured into vehicles, and the convoy lurched forward. I shoved Alara into the van, climbing in after her. As the doors slammed, I could still hear the staccato echo of suppressed gunfire fading into the distance. The van accelerated hard, throwing us both against the wall. Across from me, Alara sat with her cuffs still on, her breathing steadying. In the dim light, she looked composed. Not relieved, not shaken, composed. "You saved me," she said quietly. "Don't make it sound like gratitude," I replied. "I didn't do it for you." Her lips curved in that faint, infuriating way I remembered from the early days of our marriage, when she knew something I didn't and enjoyed the fact. "You'll see soon enough," she murmured. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, trying to read past the calm exterior, to see the cracks. But if she had any, they weren't showing tonight. Murrell was waiting when we reached the black site, a concrete fortress tucked into the cliffs beyond the naval perimeter. The convoy rolled into the underground bay, and the heavy blast doors closed behind us. "Status," he demanded as I climbed out of the van. "3 attackers neutralized. 2 more unknown," I said. "They hit us hard and fast. They knew the route." His jaw tightened. "Which means we've still got a leak." Alara was led away by 2 guards, her eyes still locked on me until the last possible moment. Murrell glanced after her, then back to me. "You kept her out of their hands tonight. That buys us time, but it also tells them exactly who they need to get rid of next." I didn't need to ask who he meant. I'd felt it in the way the runner at Dock 12 had looked at me. In the way the attaché hadn't seemed surprised when I walked into his office. In the way Alara smiled just now, like she'd seen the next move already played in her head. They weren't done with her. And now, they weren't done with me. Chapter 12, Resolution. The black site was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. No distant voices, no hum of passing vehicles, no footsteps in the corridors. Just the low, constant thrum of the generators buried somewhere deep in the concrete. Merle found me in the observation room at 0600. I'd been awake all night, replaying the convoy attack in my head. The way Alara had stayed calm while the world around her burned. "She's been asking for you," he said, stepping inside. I didn't look at him. "I'm sure she has. She says she'll only talk if you're in the room." "Not me. Not Dalka." That made me turn. "Dalka knows." "He knows," Merle said. He didn't argue. "But he did ask me to remind you. She's still his daughter." I almost laughed. "She's a lot of things, Admiral. Daughter, wife, operative. The question is, which one I'm talking to today?" Merle's gaze held mine. "This is the last chance before she's transferred out of my jurisdiction. If you want the truth, now's the time to get it." I followed him down the long hallway to the secure interrogation wing. 2 guards flanked the door to the interview room. One entered ahead of us, removing Alara's cuffs and then stepping back out, leaving her with her hands free for the first time since her arrest. She was seated at the metal table, posture perfect, hair neatly tied back. She didn't look like a prisoner. She looked like she was still in control. "Michael," she said as I sat opposite her, "you saved my life twice now. You deserve answers." "Answers," I repeated. "That's one word for it. Lies are another." Her mouth curved faintly. "Some lies are just truths you aren't ready for." I leaned forward. "Then start with the one you've been holding back. Why? Why the attaché, the convoy routes, framing me? Why all of it?" She didn't blink. "Because I was working for someone inside our own chain of command. Someone planning to use those convoys to deliver components for a weapons platform that doesn't officially exist. You've heard of Project Rook." I shook my head. "You weren't meant to. The system was designed to carry a new class of long-range precision ordnance, autonomous, self-replicating drones. Completely untraceable. Once deployed, they could wipe out a fleet in minutes. The treaties we signed would collapse overnight. And the man behind it," she leaned in, "is wearing our uniform." My gut tightened. "Who?" She shook her head. "I give you the name. You give them the chance to bury it. You know how this works." I studied her face. If she was lying, she was better at it than anyone I'd ever met. But if she was telling the truth, then every move she'd made, even the ones that had destroyed my career, had been to sabotage something far bigger. "You could have told me," I said. Her expression softened for the first time. "If I'd told you, you'd have gone straight to Dalka. He'd have gone to Merle. And Merle," she let the sentence hang. "You think Merle's in on it?" I asked. "I think Merle plays a longer game than you realize," she said. "And sometimes, in those games, a few ships get sacrificed." The door opened behind me. Merle stepped in, closing it quietly. "She's been telling you stories." "I see." Alara didn't turn. "You should tell him about Rook, Admiral. Tell him why you were willing to let your own attaché asset walk rather than expose the project." Merle's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. "Captain, your wife's using just enough truth to make you question everything else. That's what she's trained to do." "She's saying Rook exists," I said. "She's saying it's ours, and it's illegal." Merle didn't answer. That was my answer. Alara's eyes flicked to me. "Now you know why they want me gone. Not because of what I did. Because of what I know." I stood, the chair scraping back. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. "I don't know which of you is lying. But I know one thing. I'm not going to be a pawn in either of your games." Merle stepped forward. "Rourke." "No," I cut in. "You want her gone. Do it yourself. But if what she's saying is true, you'll never see me coming." For a moment, no one moved. Then Merle gave a single nod to the guards outside. They entered, cuffed Alara, and began leading her to the door. She paused as she passed me. "Michael, if you go looking for Rook, you won't survive it. But you might save the people it's aimed at." Then she was gone, the heavy door shutting behind her. Merle stood there, watching me. Careful, Captain. Curiosity has ended more careers than treason. Maybe, I said. But sometimes treason is just curiosity in uniform. I walked out without waiting for permission, the echo of my boots loud in the empty hall. Outside, the morning light was harsh against the cliffs. The convoy that would take Alara to a place I'd never see was already idling, black paint gleaming under the sun. I stood there until it pulled away, the sound of the engines fading into the wind. I had my name back, my rank, my freedom, but none of it mattered, because now I had something else, a thread. And if I pulled it, I might unravel more than just Alara's secrets. I might unravel the Navy itself.